So I recently went through something no family should ever have to face. Our farm burned to the ground, not by accident, not by some freak lightning strike. No, it was the HOA, enforcers with clipboards and smirks standing across the fence like spectators at a bonfire. They called it zoning enforcement. They called it preservation. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the barn they torched wasn't just a barn. It was a K9 training facility, and every dog inside was trained to fight back. It didn't start with sirens. It didn't even start with smoke. It started with Buddy. His claws raked against Jake's bedroom door, his howls ripping me out of sleep like a knife. First thought, coyote. Second thought, something worse. I stumbled into the hall, bare feet slapping against old wood, eyes burning. Judy collided with me, already coughing, hoodie thrown over her nightgown. Her voice cracked in panic. "Tim, it's the barn." And then the smoke hit me, thick, greasy, hot enough to sting my eyes before I even knew I was awake. I didn't grab boots, didn't grab a wallet, didn't grab anything except the crowbar leaning by the door. Funny thing about crowbars, you picture burglars, never bonfires, but the second I swung that door open, I knew we were already losing. The night sky wasn't black anymore. It was bleeding orange. Our barn, the one we built beam by beam, the one that held every tool, every dream, was already a skeleton wrapped in flames. And that's when I saw them, 3 shadows on the far fence line, standing still, hands in pockets, watching. For half a heartbeat, I moved toward them, gravel cutting into my bare feet. Then my brain screamed a name, Jake. Jake. Buddy's barking was manic now, echoing from inside the inferno. My heart cracked, because this barn wasn't just wood. It was where Jake had built obstacle courses for rescues, where the dogs, our family, lived, trained, healed. The side door burst open. Jake stumbled out, arms shielding his face, coughing so hard it doubled him over. And Buddy, God bless that dog, was dragging him by the hoodie, hauling him sideways through the smoke like he was luggage, saving him. I caught my son as he fell into the dirt, pulled him into my arms, felt Buddy circle us, barking so hard his whole body shook. Judy slammed into me from behind, voice raw. Water tanks empty, they drained them. My head snapped toward the shed. The hoses, sabotaged, pipes sliced clean. Across the field, those 3 figures still stood there, lit by the fire, shadows stretching across the grass. One of them raised a clipboard, wrote something down, like they were counting groceries, and then he smiled. Jake coughed blood into his sleeve. His voice rasped. "Dad, the puppy's still inside." "No," Judy clutched him back as he tried to surge forward. "It's too far in." But Buddy barked harder as if arguing. His eyes wild, body straining toward the flames, and then the roof groaned. That sickening crack, the kind you never forget once you've heard it, and it collapsed inward. A tidal wave of sparks lit the sky. If anyone was still in there, they weren't now. We stood frozen in the dirt, coughing, crying, powerless, watching our world burn while 3 strangers across the fence didn't move a muscle. They weren't waiting for firefighters. They weren't documenting damage. No, they were witnessing victory. And suddenly I was somewhere else. A military base, a warehouse burning, orders in my ear, stand down, let it burn. That same smell, that same helplessness. Only this time no one was giving me orders. Buddy whined low, a sound I had never heard before. Not fear, not pain, loss. I pulled Jake tighter, felt Judy's silent sobs against my shoulder, and locked eyes with those shadows across the fence. Their faces half lit, half hidden by smoke, but their intent was clear. This wasn't about zoning, wasn't about rules. This was a message, a warning. And trust me, when I finally learned why they wanted us gone, I realized the fire was just their first shot. And they should have aimed better. Everyone thinks fire is the worst of it, but fire ends fast. What it leaves behind, that's the real war. The barn was gone, ash and twisted metal, nothing else. But it wasn't just a building. It was Jake's first victory course with Buddy leading the drills. Judy's late nights stringing up lights she bought secondhand. It was every scar we healed, every laugh we fought to earn. Gone, burned clean out of the earth. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. Because the fire wasn't meant to finish us. It was meant to break us before the next hit landed. It started with a knock. You can tell a normal knock from the wrong kind. A normal knock waits. A wrong one demands 3 sharp raps like a drill sergeant with a grudge. Buddy was already up, bristling in the kitchen doorway. Jake knocked his cereal off the table, milk spilling like a tidal wave across the wood. Judy didn't move to clean it. She just stared at the door like it was a loaded gun. I grabbed the crowbar. My hand was already sweating. When I swung the door open, there she was. Karen. Her face was sharpened into something smug and sweet all at once. And behind her, two men. Identical polos, clipboards clutched like weapons, the holy trinity of HOA doom. Karen didn't bother with greetings. She just held out a yellow envelope bold as sin. "Mr. Walker," she said, syrup dripping off every word, "you are in violation of Section 4B of the Community Preservation Code. You have 30 days to comply with evacuation orders or face legal action." Buddy growled, not a warning, a promise. I took the envelope just so my hands were free. Judy crossed her arms, her glare sharp enough to draw blood. Jake stepped up beside me, fists balled like he was ready to throw down with men twice his size. "Section 4B, I said, pretending to squint at the envelope. "Is that above or below the section where you mind your own business?" Her smile tightened. "Emergency redevelopment ordinance," she said smoothly. "Your property is slated for revitalization." Behind her, the clipboard twins unfurled a giant laminated map. Red lines slashed across our land, cutting it into neat little pieces like a butcher's chart. Across the center of our ranch, big bold letters, pending transfer, Phase 1 acquisition. Jake made a noise in his throat like he wanted to spit nails. Judy's hand found mine, squeezing tight. "You can't just erase us," Jake snarled. Karen didn't even look at him. To her, he wasn't a person, just an obstacle. "You're non-compliant tenants now." I felt my voice drop into something darker. "We own this land." "Ownership is conditional under emergency code," she replied, smooth, rehearsed. She said these words before, probably to other families who already folded. Buddy barked once, loud enough to rattle the porch rails. The younger of the clipboard twins flinched like a rabbit. "You want to see non-compliant," I said. "Keep standing on my porch." Judy shot me the silent look. "Please don't get arrested today." Karen snapped the map shut. 30 days, Mr. Walker. Voluntary cooperation is strongly encouraged. Penalties increase with delay." Then she turned and marched down the steps like she already owned the place. The henchmen scrambled after her, one dropping his clipboard in the dirt before diving into their sleek black SUV. No plates, of course. They rolled out slow, gravel spitting under the tires. I just stood there, fists tight, watching them leave. Judy ripped the envelope open. Inside, a full eviction packet, threats, fines, court orders already drafted. They didn't expect us to fight. They expected us to fold. Jake's voice was ragged. "We fight right." I looked at him, at Buddy standing beside him, tail stiff like a soldier at attention. At Judy, her eyes burning even through exhaustion. "We fight." Judy added, "We fight dirty." Buddy barked once, agreement. Jake grinned, sharp, wild, defiant. And somewhere deep in my gut, a darker truth settled in. This wasn't going to end with papers. This wouldn't stop at threats. Next time, they wouldn't come with fire. Next time, they'd come for our hearts. And when they did, they'd learn exactly what happens when you back a stubborn family and one good dog into a corner. It didn't start with fire the second time. This time it was quieter, meaner. The south fence went first. Splintered posts. Wire peeled back like a drunk giant had stumbled through it. Buddy found it before I did, tail stiff, hackles raised, nose pressed to the fresh tire ruts gouged deep into the dirt. I rebuilt it by hand. Jake held nails. Buddy circled like a sentinel, eyes never leaving the tree line. By sunset, the posts were back in place. By morning, they were down again. Same tire tracks, same muddy footprints leading nowhere. That was the moment I knew. The fire wasn't random, and neither was this. The next strike hit where it hurt worse. "Water." The dog's howls woke me, real howls, not the playful morning chorus Buddy usually led. When I staggered to the troughs, they were bone dry. The main tank valve, ripped clean off like someone had brought bolt cutters just for the job. The ground was muddy, paw prints mixed with heavy boot tracks. Jake lost it. Buckets, pots, pans, anything that could hold water he dragged to the well. Buddy followed close, whining every time Jake tripped, licking at his wrists like he could will the strength back into him. Judy filled stockpots in the kitchen, hands shaking, muttering under her breath like a prayer. It wasn't enough, not even close. 3 days later, new wounds appeared. Not burned wood this time, flags. Pink and orange survey flags, hundreds of them, stuck in the dirt like neon arrows, slicing across the pasture, the training course, even through the ashes of the barn. Buddy hated them, barked until his throat went raw. Then he started yanking them out, one by one, snapping them in half with his teeth. Jake cheered him on like it was a sport until Judy stopped him. "Let them flag it," she said, her voice tight as barbed wire. "They're showing us exactly what they think they own." "Feels like painting a bullseye," I muttered. "Good," she shot back. "Let them aim." The tension was in our bones by then. Every truck that slowed near the gate made my hand drift toward the crowbar. Every creak of the porch set Buddy growling low in his chest. We slept in shifts, the three of us rotating while Buddy patrolled like a tiny general on four legs, refusing to rest. But the worst came next. Nails. Buddy found them first. Mid-run, he yelped, hopping back on three legs, paw bleeding bright red from a tiny, perfect puncture wound. Jake's shout cracked like thunder. He dropped to the ground, brushing grass aside, uncovering dozens of nails scattered like seeds across the north field. I scooped Buddy up, heart pounding, holding him tight while Jake clawed at the dirt with bare hands, gathering nails in his fists, sobbing silently. Judy found us there, me cradling a bleeding dog, Jake crying into the dirt, nails glinting like landmines all around. She didn't say a word, just dropped to her knees and pressed her forehead against Buddy's flank like it was a prayer. The wound wasn't bad, washable, bandageable, but it wasn't the cut that mattered, it was what it meant. They didn't care who got hurt, not man, not woman, not kid, not dog. As long as we bled enough to break. And it worked not all at once, but in the small ways that eat at a family's soul. Jake stopped smiling. Judy locked every door 3 times. Buddy never slept all the way anymore, one ear cocked, eyes open in the dark. We thought we had reached the breaking point. We hadn't, not yet. Because betrayal always hurts worse when it wears a familiar face. I was walking the back fence one night, shotgun slung across my shoulder, Buddy limping at my side. At first, it was just a shadow moving slow in the dark. Then the flashlight caught it. A man, hood up, moving careful, carrying something long and metal over his shoulder. Buddy froze, a growl rumbling so low it shook my chest. I raised the light higher, caught the glint, a gas can. The man turned just enough for me to see his face. Roy. Not a stranger, not an outsider. Roy, our neighbor. Roy, who'd helped Jake build his first treehouse, who'd been at every 4th of July with cheap beer and bad jokes. Roy, who taught Buddy the stupid fainting trick where he'd flop down when someone said bang. Roy now carrying fire against us. Something inside me cracked. Not loud, not violent. Just a slow, steady break like a tree splitting in a forest with no one there to hear. I yanked the front door open so hard it rattled the frame. Buddy lunged inside, barking low and furious. Judy spun, shotgun already half raised. Jake skidded into the hallway, socks sliding. "It's Roy," I said, chest heaving. "It's Roy, he's with them." Jake's face collapsed into something I'll never forget. Pure shock, pure disbelief. Judy just stared at me, her lips trembling, a realization dawning like a slow poison. That night none of us slept. We didn't even try. We sat at the kitchen table, Buddy packing circles like a restless ghost, Jake picking at a splinter in the wood until his thumb bled, Judy silent, eyes far away. We talked, we schemed, we fought, but mostly we sat drowning in the truth. If Roy had turned, who else had? We weren't surrounded by neighbors anymore. We were surrounded by enemies with familiar faces. They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from someone you trust. But what I found next proved something worse. Betrayal can wear a suit and carry a pen, and it'll gut you just the same. Judy was the one who snapped us out of the fog. She slammed her coffee down on the table so hard it splashed. "Follow the paperwork," she said. "That's where the real war is. Write the paperwork, read the paperwork, tear it apart. The boring stuff, that's the battlefield." She wasn't wrong. The next morning I drove into town. Not on the main road, I didn't need eyes on me. I took the back trails, the ones so rough my teeth rattled, parked behind the courthouse like a thief. Funny, really. Spent years defending the law, now I was sneaking around it just to survive. The public records office smelled like dust and old sweat. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. No guards, no HOA enforcers, just me and a scanner that beeped so loud I wanted to smash it. At first it was nothing, noise complaints, land disputes older than I was, citations stacked like junk mail, hours of useless paper. I almost gave up. Then I found it. A file tucked too neatly under redevelopment proposals. Stamped, signed, backdated, filed under a shell company with a fancy name, Mirk Preservation Society. But the money, the authorization signatures, one name bled through like ink on wet paper. Franklin Development Group. My stomach flipped because I knew Franklin. Not just from town, from before. Franklin was a ghost from my military days. A man who rebuilt empires from ashes, the same ashes he often helped create. He was the kind of man who looked at disaster and saw dollar signs. The kind who once told me, dead serious, never waste a good disaster. People are easier to move when they're scared. And here he was using HOA pawns to strip us down piece by piece. The fire, the sabotage, the eviction orders, the flags, all of it wasn't about zoning. It was about leverage. They didn't want our land, not really. They wanted the dogs. The training program. Buddy, I shoved the files into my jacket like a thief stealing fire and ran before my stomach could turn itself inside out. When I got home, Judy and Jake were waiting. 2 cups of coffee already poured, first aid kit open on the table like Judy was ready for whatever version of me walked through that door. Jake sat stiff-backed, fists clenched on his knees. Buddy limped over, pressed his head against my thigh. I dropped the files onto the table. The sound echoed like a hammer blow. Judy read first, lips moving silently, eyes scanning faster and faster. Jake hovered behind her, face tightening with every page. They don't want the land, Judy whispered finally, her voice trembling. They want the program, the dogs, everything we've built. Jake's face twisted, shock, betrayal, fury all colliding at once. They want Buddy, his voice cracked on the name. Buddy whimpered, sensing the storm brewing. I looked at all of them, my family, my broken old kitchen, the battered fields outside, the lives we'd rebuilt from rubble. And I made a decision. They want a war, my voice was gravel. They got one. Judy's lips curved into something between a smile and a snarl. Jake punched the air like a kid called into the final play. Buddy barked once, sharp, proud, like a general acknowledging orders. For the first time since the fire, I felt the shift, the turning of the tide. But there's a line you cross when you choose war. You stop thinking about comfort, stop thinking about tomorrow, you start thinking about survival. We sat there long into the night, the files spread out like battle maps. Every page, every signature, every scheme Franklin had laid, we dissected. Judy traced red pen across the deeds, muttering under her breath. Jake sketched traps and alarms in the margins like a soldier planning an ambush. Buddy lay curled in the corner, bad paw twitching, growling in his sleep like he was fighting battles of his own. That night I realized something chilling. Franklin didn't just want us gone, he wanted to erase us. The barn, the program, Buddy, our very names. But he'd forgotten one thing. You don't erase people who already know how to fight. You just teach them to fight harder. When I finally shut my eyes, I dreamed of fire, but this time the fire wasn't theirs. It was ours. There's a moment in every war when fear stops being the fuel and starts being the fire itself. We hit that moment the night we read Franklin's name. Judy stared at the coffee pot like it held answers. Jake paced the floor until his boots carved a path in the wood. Buddy sat at the window, one ear cocked, growling low at shadows none of us could see. The silence was unbearable. Finally, Jake slammed his hand flat on the table, rattling the stack of stolen files. We can't just let them do this. We fight. I raised a hand not to silence him but to steady him. His anger was fire, but fire needed aim. We stay, we fight, I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. Judy's eyes were raw, red-rimmed, but not broken. She nodded once. We fight smart. That was all we needed. We didn't sign oaths, didn't raise flags. We were family. That was enough. That night, we set to work. Jake rigged the front gate with a tripwire alarm, the same contraption he'd once built with Buddy for fun. Judy pulled every jug of water, every can of food into a central stockpile like she was prepping for a siege. I tore scrap metal from the barn ruins to reinforce the doors. Buddy refused to rest. Limp and all, he patrolled with us, head high, eyes sharp, every bark a rallying cry. By dawn, the ranch didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a fortress. And when we found the survey flags the next morning, those neon lies stabbing into our soil, we didn't just pull them. We lit them. One by one, we ripped them from the dirt, piled them in the drive, and struck a match. Jake cheered as the flames licked the sky. Judy smiled for the first time in days, a tired but defiant grin. Buddy sat tall, chest puffed, eyes glinting with something primal. "You hear that, Franklin?" I muttered to the smoke. "We're still here." The wind carried the black plume across the fields, straight into whatever eyes were watching us. We weren't hiding anymore. We were daring them to come. That's when Judy gave it a name. "Operation Bite Back," she said. Jake wanted to call it Operation Bring the Pain. I suggested Operation You Started It, Karen, but I got voted down 2-1. Buddy abstained. Democracy in action. The first target was the surveyors. We didn't just clear their flags. We turned the north field into chaos. Jake and I rigged tripwires with fishing line and cowbells hidden under brush. Hung stink bombs in trees, the real army surplus kind that could clear a barracks in 30 seconds. Buddy supervised, occasionally stealing a rubber snake we planted in burrows just so he could kill it himself. The next morning, one poor compliance guy in shiny loafers took 2 steps into the field, tripped the wire, and got a face full of stink bombs and rubber snakes snapping out of the dirt. He screamed so loud birds evacuated the county. Judy caught it on camera, laughed so hard she snorted coffee through her nose. Jake nearly fell off the porch railing. Buddy barked approval like it was the best fireworks show of his life. Small victories, but they mattered. Next came the clipboard cavalry. We rigged pressure plates under the gravel drive, connected to air horns hidden just beneath the dirt. First guy who tried strolling up with a compliance notice. Blam, air horn at ankle level. He jumped 5 feet back, tripped over his own clipboard, and ate dirt. Buddy barked so hard he toppled over sideways. I'm not saying I replayed the security footage 10 times that night, but I did, 20 actually. Within 2 days, the HOA patrol stopped coming altogether. The drive looked deserted, a ghost ranch. Exactly what we wanted them to think. But we knew Franklin, he wasn't giving up. 3 nights into our little campaign, Buddy stiffened by the back door. Not a bark this time, just a low, steady growl that rolled through his chest like thunder. Jake grabbed the floodlights. Judy slung the shotgun over her shoulder like she was born with it. I tightened my grip on the crowbar. And there he was. Roy. But not like before. No gas can this time. No backup. Just him standing outside the fence, hands empty, shivering like a stray in the rain. Buddy lunged, teeth bared. It took everything I had to yank the leash back. Roy flinched like the dog had bitten his soul. "I need to talk," he rasped. My voice was stone, talk fast. He swallowed hard, eyes darting like prey. "Franklin, he's bringing in professionals, contractors, men who don't ask questions." "Sounds like your kind of crowd," I said coldly. He winced hard. "Not anymore," he whispered. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and dropped it into the dirt. Coordinates, timetables, entry points. Then he backed away into the dark, shoulders hunched, shame trailing him like smoke. I didn't forgive him, not for a second, but I'd use him. Because Roy had just given us something Franklin never expected. A timeline. 48 hours. 2 days to turn our battered ranch into a war zone. 2 days to prepare for the fight of our lives. They say there's a point in every fight where you stop thinking about comfort and start thinking about survival. We crossed that point the second Roy's paper hit the dirt. 48 hours. That was all the time we had before Franklin's cleanup crew arrived. I dragged an old chest down from the attic, the one I hadn't opened in 15 years. Jake's eyes went wide when I cracked it. Signal jammers, camouflage netting, flashbangs stitched together with chewing gum and desperation. My old training kit. The past came flooding back like it never left. Muscle memory doesn't die, it just waits. Judy took charge of supplies. Food, water, dog gear, first aid. She stacked everything in the kitchen like she was building a bunker. Jake and Buddy ran the perimeter, rigging alarms out of tin cans, tripwires, motion detectors stripped from junkyard scraps. We mapped choke points, narrow spots near the barn ruins where anyone coming through would have to funnel. We set traps there, caltrops hidden under leaves, flares wired to trip switches, nets coiled tight and ready to spring. By the second night, the ranch didn't just feel like home anymore. It felt like a war zone. When sunset bled across the fields, we stood on the porch, silent, watching. The house was battered, the barn was ashes, the fences sagged, but it was ours. "You ready?" Jake asked, voice low. "Never been readier," Judy said, slinging the shotgun onto her shoulder. Buddy barked once, sharp, proud. I looked at them, the only reason I was still standing, and I nodded. "They want to fight," I said. "Let's give them one." The night started wrong. The cricket stopped first, then the dogs shifted uneasy. The wind died, leaving the fields too still, too quiet. And then the dark started watching back. Buddy stiffened by the door, growl rolling deep through his chest. Not a warning, a promise. The radio crackled once, twice, then went dead. Signal jammed. Game on. Shapes moved at the north fence. 3, maybe 4 at first. Low, fast, professional. Their movements were too clean, too precise. These weren't clipboard carriers. These were hired guns. I let them come close enough to think we were asleep. Then Jake snapped the first tripwire. Crack. A flare erupted, painting the yard blood red. Shadows leapt tall across the walls. Buddy lunged, barking so hard it shook the porch. Jake whooped like a wild thing. I charged, crowbar in hand. My feet slid on wet grass as I swung hard. The first merc took the hit in the ribs, folded like a bad hand of cards. The others scattered, straight into the net trap Judy and I had rigged. They went down screaming, tangled in wire like fish in a barrel. I didn't hesitate. I dropped the crowbar across the nearest helmet with a crunch that rattled my arms. Buddy tore across the yard, intercepting another runner. He clamped onto the man's backpack, dragging him down into the mud like a wolf taking prey. His growls were feral, unstoppable. Judy's shotgun barked twice from the south line, sharp, precise, her silhouette solid as iron against the chaos. More figures spilled through the gaps. Jake yanked another tripwire, flashbang this time. The yard exploded with light and sound. My ears rang, my vision whited out. I dropped to a knee, swinging blind, feeling the crowbar connect with something soft, hearing a grunt and a curse. Hands clawed at me. Boots stumbled past me. My breathing and theirs blended into one frantic, ragged storm. Flashlights cut wild patterns through the smoke. Orders shouted, boots thundering. Then Jake's voice breaking through the noise, for Buddy. I turned just in time to see him tackle a man twice his size into the mud. Fists flying, mud and blood mixing. Buddy snarled beside him, teeth flashing, dragging another attacker back by his vest. Even with a limp, the dog fought like a demon, shielding Jake's body with his own. Judy reloaded with machine precision. Click, boom, every shot measured, every shell protecting the line. They were good, but we were desperate, and desperation wins more battles than polish ever will. A merc lunged for Judy, too late. Buddy slammed into his knees, tripping him midair. He hit the dirt hard, weapon skidding. Every second stretched thin, every breath earned. By the time the second flare lit the sky, green this time, the tide had shifted. The mercs broke. At first, just one retreating, then another, then all of them stumbling back over the fences, melting into the woods. Gone. We didn't chase, didn't need to. The message was sent, clear, permanent. Jake dropped flat on his back, laughing like he was half crazy. Buddy flopped beside him, licking his face, tail thumping weakly in the dirt. Judy staggered to the porch and slid down the wall, shotgun across her lap, face buried in her hands. I stood there in the wreckage of our yard, breathing hard, body aching, crowbar sticky in my grip, and let it hit me. We did it. We held. The ranch was a wreck. Half the traps were sprung, the fence was torn, the power line was shot, but it was still ours. When the sun finally cracked the horizon, gold spilling across the battered fields, I sat on the porch steps with the crowbar across my knees. Buddy curled against Jake, finally sleeping. Judy sipped from a chipped mug, her hands trembling but steady enough to hold on. We were bloodied, bruised, exhausted, but not broken. And Franklin had just learned the one truth he never accounted for. You can burn buildings, you can sabotage fences, you can cut water, scatter nails, send hired guns. But you can't kill a family's will to fight. And ours had just begun. Sunrise didn't look like victory, it looked like work. Golden lights spilled across wreckage. The north fence ripped apart. Survey flags trampled into the mud, smoke curling low from the bonfire of neon lies we'd torched. The dogs limped stiffly, Buddy most of all, but they were alive. Jake's laughter echoed thin, broken, but real. Judy sipped burnt coffee from a chipped mug, her eyes tired but fierce. Me, I sat on the porch steps, crowbar laid across my knees like a saber, listening to the silence. For the first time in weeks, the quiet didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a gift. "Should we call the sheriff?" Jake muttered. "Maybe after another cup," Judy said dryly. None of us moved. We just breathed in the fragile stillness like it was oxygen. Later, when the adrenaline wore off, the work began. We patched what we could, pulled bent nails with our bare hands and hammered them straight, propped sagging fence posts, rewired security lights, rebuilt the gate from splintered boards. Our hands bled, our backs screamed. But every nail driven back in place felt like a declaration: we are still here. Neighbors trickled in slowly, cautiously, some just checking in, pretending they weren't carrying casseroles, spare parts, or scrap lumber. Some stayed longer, helping repair roof lines, bracing fence posts, patching bullet holes in the water tanks. No one asked questions. No one needed to. Not everyone came. Some turned their heads when we drove into town. Some whispered that we brought the trouble here ourselves. Let them whisper. We weren't fighting for them. The sheriff filed a half-hearted report, scribbled a few notes, promised an investigation that everyone knew would disappear into dusty cabinets. We didn't waste our breath hopping. Some battles you win by surviving, others by simply refusing to leave. The ranch healed slowly, and so did we. Buddy favored his injured paw for weeks, but it didn't slow him down. If anything, it made him sharper, smarter, more dangerous in the best ways. Jake trained him with new tricks. Play possum became a crowd favorite. Buddy would flop over, stiff as a corpse, until Jake clapped twice, and he'd spring up like a jack-in-the-box, tail wagging like he'd just fooled the world. He also learned a new command: guard the future. And somehow he understood. Every time Jake led the younger dogs through their drills, Buddy sat by the gate, watching like a sentry, tail wagging slow and steady, not just guarding the yard, guarding what came next. Judy worked her own kind of magic. She turned the ranch into a nonprofit, filed paperwork until her eyes crossed, fought bureaucrats with the same grit she'd used to fight Franklin's mercs. She secured grants. She carved protections into law. Piece by piece, she built something bigger than any one family, something no HOA or developer could quietly erase. Jake grew up fast. He took charge of training, proud of the younger dogs, progress, proud of the land, proud of us. Every scar on the ranch was a scar on him, too, but he wore it like armor, not shame. Some nights we sat on the porch together, Buddy stretched across our feet like a living shield, Jake tossing a tennis ball lazily into the twilight, Judy sipping her terrible coffee. We didn't talk about Franklin anymore. He didn't belong in these conversations. He was just a shadow, an echo, a ghost who failed to erase us. Instead, we talked about the future, about new barns, new courses, new dogs who deserved a second chance. The scars didn't vanish, not from the land, not from us. Some nights a creak in the floor still jolted me awake, heart pounding like I was back in a war zone. Some nights Buddy patrolled twice before settling, his ears twitching at every sigh of the wind. But we kept going anyway, together. Because when the world comes to tear you down, you don't vanish. You dig in deeper. And we did. Every sunrise, Buddy sprinted across the fields with Jake chasing him, both of them laughing breathlessly. Judy shook her head, smiling despite herself. And me? I leaned back in my chair, crowbar still propped by the porch door, coffee steaming in my battered mug, and whispered the same promise every morning. You think you can break us, Buddy thinks otherwise. And Buddy, he never lost. Some stories end with fireworks, ours ended with quiet. Not silence born of fear, but peace, the kind you only understand after surviving storms. The ranch never looked the same after the fire. The scars stayed, charred earth where the barn once stood, bullet dents in water tanks we never bothered to replace. Fence posts patched so many times they leaned like old soldiers. But it stood, and so did we. Neighbors called it stubbornness. Some whispered recklessness. Maybe they were right, but to us it wasn't about pride. It was about survival, about refusing to let fear dictate the rest of our lives. The HOA faded. Franklin moved on, chasing another disaster he could profit from. He never came back here. Maybe because he underestimated us. Maybe because he knew if he did, he wouldn't walk away the same. But in the end, it didn't matter. He didn't win. We did. Not in a courtroom, not on paper, but in the only way that matters, by living, by building again, by refusing to vanish. Buddy carried his limp for the rest of his days, but he wore it like a medal, not a wound. Kids in town whispered about him like he was a legend, the dog who dragged a boy out of fire, who tore through mercenaries like a soldier, who guarded the ranch long after sunset. Jake never let anyone forget it. Every training session, every course he built, Buddy was there, sitting by the gate, watching, teaching, living proof of what it meant to fight back. And Judy, she turned grief into grit. The nonprofit she founded grew. Grants came in. Strays turned into trainees. Soldiers found healing through dogs that nobody else wanted. She made sure no one could ever take this land from us again, not with paper, not with fire, not with guns. Me, I never stopped keeping the crowbar by the door. Old habits die hard. Every creak in the night still wakes me. Every unfamiliar truck still makes my pulse quicken. But I also started laughing again, real laughter, the kind that comes from knowing you didn't just survive, you carved out a future worth defending. Some nights we sat on the porch in the fatting light. Jake tossing a tennis ball, Buddy chasing it with the same crooked grin. Judy sipping coffee that never seemed to improve. And me, leaning back in the old chair, watching my family against a backdrop of scarred but living land. We didn't talk about Franklin. We didn't talk about the HOA. We didn't need to. Because what mattered wasn't what they tried to take. It was what we refused to let go. Buddy would sprint across the field, ears pinned back, tail flying like a flag. Jake's laughter would echo behind him, wild and free. Judy's smile would soften, tired but content. And I'd whisper to myself every single time, "You think you can break us, Buddy thinks otherwise." And Buddy never lost, not once. That's the thing about families like ours. You can burn the barns, you can scatter the nails, you can send every mercenary you've got. But you can't kill the fire inside people who have already learned to rise from ashes. Because sometimes victory doesn't look like conquering. Sometimes it looks like staying. Sometimes dignity doesn't look like pride. Sometimes it looks like survival. And sometimes the fiercest warriors walk on 4 legs. Buddy was proof of that, every sunrise, every bark, every step. The HOA tried to erase us. Franklin tried to own us. But all they did was teach us who we really were. A family, a home, a fight that no fire could burn out. And if anyone ever tries again, well, Buddy's waiting. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one, the truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.